Okay, I attended a course once on participation, and maybe I understand it within a line from not notifying people of something that's going to happen and it just happening, which is like the least amount of consultation or information or participation that's possible, right through like a spectrum, which you might say is kind of notifying them, consulting them, whether that's sincere or just showboating, right through to a kind of a participation process, which is really actually changes as a result of the participation. So the way in which people engage is sincere, and their involvement impacts how the project outcome is. So we were looking at things like kind of political systems and democracy, but it was interesting to think about participation as a kind of a more thorough way of viewing consultation, and consultation as a less deep way of understanding participation. So that's useful for my understanding of it. I remember being invited to come and participate in some political changes, or what would be called infrastructural changes within the county council. Do you want us to spend money on this? Do you want us to spend money on that? Come into this room, here are some post-it notes, put stickers next to the things that you want. So basically you've got an infinite number of stickers, and you can stick an infinite number of stickers onto anything. Everything is kind of rendered in the same black and white text on white posters on the walls. It's a beautiful sunny day and there's nobody in the room. So there's a few earnest people in there sticking pointless stickers up on the walls. There's no sense, there's no quantitative sense, there's no qualitative sense, there's no like, here's your fat one gold sticker, put this on the single most important issue for you. And certainly there's no interface between the indoors and the outdoors. There's nobody on the streets drawing people in. It's just, you know, the absolute kind of most driest sort of form of participation. And I think in my work, I've tried really hard to have things much more colourful, and to try and just to have fun, you know, and invite people in into projects in a more visceral way, more kind of hands-on, visceral, outdoors, colourful way of engaging with people. I've run quite a few laboratories, so this is inviting people in and then working with participants who, in a sense, have self-selected to be there. So I've worked on sort of participatory design processes where working as a group of people, sort of try and draw out themes together and generate work, and that would be one way of working. But what did I really want to say? I wanted to refer to something else. Oh yes, I'm going to talk about the Woodland Pavilion that we created, because this was different. Running participatory design workshops where people have effectively self-selected, the job's already done for you, people have turned up. Once you've got people who've turned up, and you've got a certain amount of empathy for people, and the outcomes aren't absolutely delineated at the start, it's all fun and everybody has a great time, and you know, all power to that kind of work. The more difficult process, which is something that the Woodland Pavilion tried to achieve, was to try and create a kind of an open space which people would then start to programme their own events within. Now, the times that we've done this really well, there's a couple of pieces of work that I've built with others collectively. The junk boat was one of them, and this was a space where it was a kind of a big piece of sculpture which had workshops on economics for sustainability. It had late night raves, it had soft shoe discos in the middle of the day for kids, it had electronic music workshops, it had anything and everything all the time. So, you know, you'd walk past the boat at a festival, which interestingly is a catchment of a huge number of people, so you've already got an audience, and it's just this fantastic environment of things always happening. And we ran open mic nights that were just brilliant, you know, and by providing certain support structures like a microphone, PA system, and a lot of banter and enthusiasm, suddenly just people were just coming out of the woodwork and sharing their poetry on stage. And you know, sometimes you make pieces of work like this which are they relational, are they participatory? It's hard to say, but they draw people in. And what's key to those, I think, is having a large catchment of people and having the kind of support structures ready to enable them to get involved. Now, we tried to create a project called the Woodland Pavilion in Machynlleth, and it achieved some of the things that it set out to do, but the reasons why it didn't achieve more were that the original idea that I had with Henry Widdicombe to create a stage for the Machynlleth Comedy Festival, which is a great idea, and it worked really well for their festival, and it has done for the last few years. But the funders that we went to, the requirements that they had, the way in which the process unfolded, it meant that we were kind of running really, really hard to jump through lots of hoops, when really what we should have been doing was out meeting people and saying, would you like an outdoor space to host some of your brownie events, to host some of your football events? What would that look like if we were to make it? And, or would you not use it? And, is this going to be a bit of a white elephant? But to actually kind of go out and invite people to respond to the idea of something, securing their interest, then securing their support, having some kind of design consultation with them, a kind of a slower, longer, drawn-out process that goes from, let's say, notification to consultation to participation. What we would have really had at the end of that is we would have had a staging set in the woods that was used by people more. The entire, the local town council whose land it was located on, they'd have been more inclined to kind of cover the public liability. The county council might have been more inclined to subsidise that. The different groups might have been more inclined to programme it in advance, because it takes a long time for people to make changes. And the pace with which we kind of had the idea, installed the piece, and then, ta-da, it's up. It was hard for people to participate. So when we created our own events, they were well attended. When the Machynlleth Comedy Festival created events, they were well attended. It worked functionally, socially, but it didn't really draw in new audiences because the timeline was too quick. And I think that would probably be my, the biggest thing I would say is that you've got to have a really generous timeline if you want sincere participation in a project. One of the challenges is having an appropriate timeline, having enough flexibility in the project that things can really change. With this design laboratories I was mentioning, first design laboratory that Tabitha Pope and I ran was brilliant. It was just so brilliant, and we enjoyed it. And there was really no aims. The aims were to come together and to make things that reflected how we felt about being there at the time. That was the aim. And because of that, everybody made wonderful, wonderful things. There was a water-powered xylophone, this kind of crazy sort of mycelium thing growing out of a dead oak tree, and then a stargazing bowl. And these three sculptures that these engineers and artists and students made over a couple of days were just really great. And I think it's because there was no aim. You could just throw yourself behind whatever you wanted to do. And then later, some of the laboratories that I've run have been really outcome driven. So for example, we ran a laboratory for the Midland Arts Centre for the event Sounding the River, which is Johnny Easterby's fantastic riverside celebration of the river there. And is it the River Ray? I think it's the River Ray. Anyway, that was more difficult because we were saying, hi, come in, let's do anything, but we've got this many days, and at the end of it, it's going to be a part of the show, it's going to be lit up, and it can't be rubbish. Whoa. So that's much harder, and so then that limits your ability to create something really responsive, because you're kind of closing down the project too soon. Now the fact is that the participants on that enjoyed themselves a lot, so they said, but I think that the constraints were a problem for leading and facilitating that process, and I think more could have been achieved if we'd had less outcomes delineated at the start. Yeah, that would be my thinking. All of my work relates to people because it's architectural. So pretty much everything that I make have made, am intending to make, exists in relation with people. So I don't really make things to look at, I make things to experience, to walk in, under, through, juxtapose yourself next to. Often they're very celebratory spaces. They're about kind of creating environments for people to connect with themselves, with each other, with their immediate environment. And so I think it's quite hard for me to understand what relation is, or relationships, or relational aesthetics is, because everything I do is relational. And that can be a problem as an artist, because I query that if I've got this sort of single-mindedness to just to do something absolutely for the sake of it, because as someone who also practices as an architectural designer, I'm always thinking, well, what does the client think? How's that going to impact upon the context? And what are the planners going to say? Or, I'm constantly driving the concept and cross-checking it against the different sort of stakeholders. So I sort of work within that kind of way of thinking about multi-stakeholder relationships. So probably a curse and a blessing.